AppSheet Actions help you manage how users interact with your app and what data they can change throughout the application. Hello, I'm Rich Ellis, Global AppSheet Customer Engineer Lead at Google. So let's take a look at what makes up an AppSheet action. First off, there are distinct operations that exist in an application. So depending on the type, actions can be either triggered by the user or leveraged in automation steps. Here I am in my handy task management app that I've created, and I want to start to add actions to either direct certain user behaviors or change data in a controlled manner. So in this app, I have a view here with projects, and down below I have related tasks. So I can find my actions under the left nav bar here with the lightning bolt icon. When I click on it, I'm taken to the section that shows me all of my existing actions that currently exist. And these include all the system generated actions that are default that you typically see when you create a new app, such as add, delete, and edit. Every action that's created is aligned with a table that exists in your app. So you'll see that each of the actions listed here are grouped underneath each of the tables that exist in your application. So in this particular app, I have a projects table, a task table, and a users table. And I could see the associated actions underneath each of these tables. Now let's say I wanted to create an action under the tasks table, and as a result, any view that is associated with that task. I can click the little plus button next to the table. Go ahead and click the create a new action for task. In this view, we can give our action a new name and then verify that it is the correct table that we're creating this action. So we can also change the table that our action is associated with if we created it in the wrong table itself. Now, if you look at the emulator on the right side, you'll see immediately that this action is automatically created here. So you can see what it looks like and what position it exists in at any point through the action creation process. After we verify the table that our action is associated with, we can now set the type of action that's available. And when I click the drop-down menu here, I can see that I have my different app types that we'll cover here. Now we're going to go over the different types of actions shortly, but first I want to cover all the other parts of an action that remain consistent regardless of the action type that you choose to use. We have position. This allows you to position the action button in different locations of a particular view. Primary views allow you to have your action as an overlay in either your mobile application or as a primary view in the top right corner of your browser application. Prominent views allow you to display the action at the top of each detail view. And this is also reflected in the desktop-based view shown here at the top of a detail view. Then you have inline views. Inline views allow you to associate an action with a particular field in with a particular field in any of your views. So in this situation, if I wanted my action to be associated with the status field, I can go ahead and choose to attach this action to my status field. And you'll see that action is now shown up here to the right of my field. Then we can also have hidden actions as well. And this is important if you have actions that will either be relied upon by other actions or used in automation steps where you may not need to actually show the action to a user in your application. Then moving down even further, you have the ability to create a display name if you have to change the name of your action without affecting the overall structure of your app. There's also action icons that you could set. So just like with views, you can have a particular action icon that's associated with an action, so these actions can be more intuitive. And then you could also set behaviors as well. So you can add an expression to define when the actions are either visible or valid for an automation to run by setting the expression here in this field. You can add a confirmation requirement by toggling the needs confirmation button along with a custom message if need. Whenever you are viewing your application in the emulator, you can also ensure that you have the edit toggle on, and this will allow you to quickly navigate to any action setting that exists in your app to make changes to that. There are 4 types of actions we're going to cover today, and we'll give examples as we talk about each of these types. The first action type is app action type. Now these are only user facing, so only users can interact with these buttons that appear in the application. Basically, this gives the ability to take your users to a different view within the app, open a different app's view, or even export and import data into that particular application. Let's take a look how some of these actions function and how you could set those up inside of your app. So back in the editor here with our new action, we can see in the drop-down menu are different app type actions that are available to us. The first one that we're going to cover here is copy this row and edit this copy. What this allows us to do is take data from an existing record, and when the user clicks that action in that record, it'll open up a new form with all of that data copied into the form itself. Now this just acts like a standard form at this point, where the user has to save the form in order for the data to be saved. Next, you have the ability to edit this row. This is the same as that edit button that exists by default in your application when you create your app. The third app type action allows us to export and import CSV files. If you want to go into another view within the same app, then you can use this action here to go to another view within this app. And once again, you can use several of the functions here related to creating the deep link to the view itself. So you can use link to view, where you just specify the view name, and you could ignore the app ID here in the expression. There's also link to form. So this allows you to take people to a form view that is pre-populated with values from the starting record. Let's take a look how this works. So let's say I want to go and create another tasks. I can say that I want to go to the task form, and then I'm going to specify what values I want to copy over, such as maybe the project ID. So I could say I want to copy over the project ID field, and then I want to carry over the actual project ID by specifying a column reference in there. Now I could repeat these column pairs, this pattern for additional columns as needed. So when I hit save now and I hit the action button, you'll see that I'm taken to the form with the project ID automatically populated. And also note that any existing initial values that have been set by your application will also be carried over. Another deep link type you could use to go to another view within the app is the ability to use link to filtered view. Link to filtered view allows you to specify an existing view and apply a filter almost like a slice, but in this situation it would be a dynamic slice that can be based off of existing values from the current record that the user is viewing. So you could just specify the view name that you want to take people to, and it should be a row-based view or a record-based view with many records, and then you can just have the filter like so. For example, maybe I want to show a view of my tasks or projects So maybe I want to show a view of my projects where the start date is less than or equal to the current record start date. So now I've created this action that will take me to a filtered view for a particular, or a filtered view of projects where the start date is less than or equal to whatever the value is from the current record that I'm viewing. Then to round it out, we also have link to row, which allows you to navigate a particular detail view or form view by identifying the key that you want to take users to. Then link to parent view, which is essentially a back button that allows you to navigate to the previous view that the user was looking at. The next example we're going to cover here is the ability to go to another AppSheet app. So when you go to another AppSheet app, you can use link to view, which allows you to specify a view and the app ID, or you can also have the link to app function where you just specify the app ID and then it'll take the user to the default view for that application. Next, we have the ability to add a new row to another table using values from this row. So unlike the copy this row and edit the copy, this allows you to cross tables and take that information to a different table. After you select that type, then you're able to choose what table you want to copy that information to. And then you could also set the columns appropriately and populate automatically. Then there's also the option to open a form and add a new row to this table, which is essentially add a new row, add a new record button. That's the same as these default add buttons that exist when you create your app. The last two I'm going to cover for the app type actions is the ability to import and export CSV files. So to create an action, all I have to do is set the type. You can choose a CSV file locale, or it'll default to your table settings. And then you want to make sure you set the position to primary. These CSV export and import actions can only be used in views that show multiple records. So here I have my action here, and we're going to rename this just for clarity. Here I've renamed my action type to CSV export, and also I'm going to have a little download icon to disk. So I can see in the emulator here I now have my CSV export. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the export will export the data from the associated slice, not the particular view layout. So you'll want to make sure that the slice that's associated with the view only contains the data you want to allow for people to download through this action. And now users, they can click on that button and it'll immediately download onto their device. And then we can go into Google Sheet and import this CSV file. And you can see our data has been successfully exported from our app. Now on the flip side of the coin, you also have the ability to create a CSV import button as well. So let's say you want to provide the option to bulk upload data into the app. You can create this CSV import action by choosing the appropriate import a CSV file for this view. And once again, this is also not a row level action, so you can only use it on views that show multiple records. And then we'll also make sure we show an upload icon. So let's say I have the sheet with several tasks that I want to add and bulk upload. I can go ahead and download this as a CSV onto my drive and then go into my app here and click upload CSV. Now the user can go ahead and import that file directly to the app and see the additional records that they just imported into the application. The next action type are data action types. This can be both user-facing and used by automation steps. And as it implies, this will allow you to change data that is used by the app in the background. So we're back with our empty action again that we've just created. We have our first data action type, which is to set the values of some columns in this row. So this simply allows us to set particular fields, to identify particular fields, and then set a value for that field. Let's say I wanted to create an accept button for any particular task in my application. Well, I could use this set the values of some columns in this row action type and simply define the logic behind what value gets associated with the sign to. So it'll be the user's email of whoever clicks the button, and then also the status, where we would want to change the status to in progress after a task is accepted. And now once we have this set, we can then click that button and we can see that these fields are automatically populated as soon as I push the button. And then I could also leverage the behavior section too to make sure that this action button also goes away when it's no longer needed. So the moment that status is moved from not started to in progress, I would want this button to go away. So I could just say when the status equals not started is when that button is valid. So for any views that are currently in progress, I do not see that button. But if I do have a task that has not been started yet, that button is visible for the user to click on. Next, we have the ability to add a new row to another table using values from this row. In short, this allows you to take data from the existing view the user is looking at and then automatically copy it in the background to another table. So all you have to do is define the table you want to add that data to, and then just like we did in the previous example, you just simply define what columns you want to populate automatically and their respective values. You can also delete records from a view. Just like with some of the other actions, this is also a default action that you would see in most tables that allow for deletions. And then we also have the last data type action here, which is execute an action on a set of rows. And this is probably the most complicated one. So let's walk through it step by step. So let's say I wanted to create an action that allows you to mark all tasks as complete at a project level. So each project has multiple tasks. So I could create an action at the project level. So we can see here in our app, I have all these tasks that are currently in progress, but I want to create one button that allows me to mark them all off with the click of the button. So I'll go ahead and give this a name. Mark all tasks as complete. And this will be associated with the projects table because that will be what the user views when they're creating the action. And we're going to use the execute an action on a set of rows. And for the reference table, we're going to then choose the tasks table. So this is going to be essentially the target table that you want the action to act on. Then for reference rows, we're going to identify the actions that we want to then trigger. For referenced rows, we want to identify the records in the target table that we want to act on. In our situation, we have a relationship between the projects and the task table, So we can easily, in our Data Explorer, choose related tasks and use that as a way to identify the different tasks that we want to act upon. And then we just simply define the referenced action that we want to trigger. We can see here that we have a complete action that we currently had existing in our task table, so we can then trigger that complete action for each of the related tasks. When I hit save, so here I have my action mark all tasks as complete and the current status of those tasks. When I click this button, you'll see that they all now change to complete. And then, just like I mentioned earlier, these do not have to be only user facing. You can actually create an automation with a step that allows you to run a data action. So by choosing this option, when you create your automation, you can then choose any existing action that you've created for a particular table. The next type we're going to cover here is external action types. Now these are also only user facing, and this allows you to essentially take users to non-AppSheet app views, whether that be a Gmail app or the text messaging app or even Google Maps, just as some examples. These actions basically leverage the intent systems on those devices to open up those external applications where applicable. So let's take a look at creating these external action types in our tasks table. We have the first one we're going to cover is go to a website. This allows you to specify a website, specify the URL target, and then take a user to a particular website. Now, the one thing that isn't so obvious is this also will leverage the intent system on the OS that the user is using. So, for example, if you put in maps.google.com or even a deep link to maybe route navigation or a location in Google Maps, then that'll actually open up the Maps app on the device with that deep link opened as well. So you're able to integrate AppSheet apps at a closer level than you may expect for a no-code platform. The next type is open a file. This just simply allows you to open up a file on your device if you have a file type column in your app. And this will leverage the default file handler for your device. Then we have start a phone call. So this will open up the phone dialer on your device, and you can specify the phone number to be called. You could start a text message. So this will open up the SMS or the text messaging client on those devices. And you could specify what is the to number and then even pre-populate a message for that text. There's also start an email. So you can open up the email client on the device, the default email client on the device, and pre-populate the to email address, the subject, and the body automatically with data from your app. And the last thing we're going to cover here is grouped actions. Grouped action allows you to combine different actions together and have AppSheet trigger multiple actions at the same time. So these can also be user-facing or be used in automations in your app. The one thing I will point out here is when you're grouping data action types and view action types in the same grouped action, you'll want to trigger the set up the data types first before going to the view types. Whenever you have a view type action in a group, that will, once the app goes to that particular view, any subsequent actions will not be triggered. let's say I want to use a grouped action to actually mark something as complete and also allow the user to draft an email with the data from the task. So I'll give it a name, complete, and send email. And then we're going to choose the grouped action and simply say we want to mark it as complete using our existing complete action, and then our compose email where I've set up a type that carries over information from our task. So now when I click that button, not only will we mark the status as complete, and then as a user I'm taken to the compose email where I could then finish drafting where I have information pre-populated from my app into my email draft on my default email client. So in summary, actions are a powerful way to allow you as the app creator to set up specific workflows and manage how data is modified within your app and create those rule sets for the different users.